Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Tanks. We are gonna talk about tanks. If you are here for the map update, check out the video that's either appearing somewhere here or just go and see the previous video where I did a very thorough map update. This one is going to be just purely me talking and discussing the situation around the supplies of tanks to Ukraine. And first and foremost is I want to congratulate you all for everyone that gave shit to Mr. Olaf Scholz government and put pressure on your local politicians as well for actually trying to achieve the desired result. So when people were defending and trying to say like, hey, maybe guys, you need to chill, guys, we understand that we all want to be civilized, but the situation is a little bit demanding. So with all respect, but it worked, right? Giving shit to your democratically elected politicians to make sure that they hear the voice of people is important because this is what produces results. And we see this right as the tanks are being announced 4 days after the Ramstein meeting on the 20th. I know we were expecting on the 20th on the Ramstein meeting, but overall I was very, very certain that the tanks will come. So what will the tanks give us and what are we even expecting? So in total, we're expecting about 100 roughly, maybe 150-ish Western style tanks. I am expecting this to be the first bunch. And also this includes Abrams tanks. So without Abrams tanks, maybe it's going to be a little bit less. So what we should expect that delivery of tanks will take about 3 to 4 months. This is mostly due to the training requirements. For a proper crew to be trained on tank, it's going to take roughly 3 months. I know that the Ukraine has been used to very speed up programs, but then on the other hand, it doesn't really make sense to just train the crew and if there is no tanks delivered, because we hear that some of the deliveries of tanks are supposed to be quite soon, basically in a couple of weeks, whereas the other ones, such as for example US for Abrams, might take a while, because what was said is that the request for Abrams will go to the factory that produces them, and I'm guessing for Ukraine they will just kind of jump the queue. So overall, it still might take quite a while. Some of the most conservative estimates says that producing these Abrams might take over a year. Whereas others are saying that it might be already existing Abrams tanks, and basically the biggest kind of secret technology in all those stored Abrams tanks in US is the depleted uranium mesh that is in them, and it's essentially is a secret technology. It's never exported to the tanks, for example, sorry, I forgot the country. Oh my God, Egypt. The Egypt is using, right? They don't have the depleted uranium armor in them. It's like a mesh that's like a plate that is in between armor. So they're gonna substitute that for like, I think it's lead or something like this. And then the Abrams will come in. But Leopards is obviously the thing that we're looking the most. Ukraine is gonna get a mishmash from here and there of different Leopard types. I believe Germany is going to provide Leopards 2A6, which is like a penultimate modification. The latest one is like 2A7. So 2A6 is a really important one because they added a lot more powerful main barrel. But then on the other hand, the 2A4s are also pretty good. And I want to say that while the barrel is really good, I do not think that it is critical, because in Ukraine, we do not see a lot of tank on tank action. We do not see really the tank battles that was basically the Second World War famous for. We're seeing mostly World War I style trench warfare, and tanks are used quite often as either a local, like a moving assault vehicle, or more often than not, it's used as a like a close range artillery system, basically that drives into dug-in position, gets the turret up, and then shoots it with like for some like couple of kilometers forward without the direct line of sight. And just the drones that navigates them. So this is how we've been seeing the tanks being used. Obviously, they have been used in some kind of assaults that Ukraine was doing in Kherson and so on, but it wasn't a large scale. So why is that a big deal? Why is 100 tanks? That's not really a big number for Ukrainian scale. Russia has roughly, people were counting, it was about like 6,000 tanks that were operational. It was, I believe up to 10,000. I think it was Covered Cabal, YouTube channel, that actually did a review. You can actually Google it right after this video. And it was about how many tanks does Russia actually has. And so this guy basically just went over the satellite images over the Russian storage facilities, because Russia stores their tanks for the most part over the under the open air, and they basically counted every single one of them. That was basically the methodology, which is genius actually, because he was able to derive some data from it, like see how many tanks are in completely ruined condition, how many tanks are looking that they're okay, and he did good estimates. And so far, based on a lot of those estimates and a lot of what analysts have been saying, we can roughly say that Russia is having about 6,000 tanks. The capacity of Russian production, it was ramping up during the previous year because they were still not having the ramp up facility. It started to be completely majorly ramped up around September-ish and forward. That's when they were producing at maximum. They started pumping out around like 90 T90Ms per month, which is quite a lot when you think about this. However, now we're seeing the reports saying, well, that was it for the stocks of all of the sanctioned goods that they had. So as Russia entered essentially the sanctions lists, some of the goods were still delivered and they had some stockpiles, and they used those stockpiles to essentially build those tanks. Now we're hearing that a lot of advanced optics, a lot of the communications inside of those tanks are already not available in that big of a quantity. Now, we should obviously never expect the sanctions will always work 100%, so Russia will find some gray channels to get some of the equipment. But A, it's going to become more expensive to do, and B, is going to become less frequent. So we will see that most probably Russia will shift from developing like 100 T90Ms. Maybe they're going to make them a little bit worse. Like they're going to use worse optics. They're going to be essentially closer to what T72 was. So let's say instead of T90s, they're going to start pumping up T72s, which are not the best kind of tanks. Like the best part about T72, it was cheap. Russian tanks were designed the way that they're designed because they needed mass tank production for huge quantities. That was the Soviet doctrine. In the Soviet doctrine, they've produced tanks in a large numbers because their combat potential was basically driven by the fact that you can overwhelm your enemy with the mass. So you would be able to strike the point of the enemy and then put whole your effort. And we see actually Russia still doing the same tactics on the battlefield. So you will see like Russia is preparing for attack. They will first advance some kind of a lighter package first wave, and they will push it forward along the front line, and they will see how the first wave is doing. And if they see that the first wave is not basically pushed back and kicked back into the world of the dead, then most likely there is some kind of potential for a weak point. Then they will send the second echelon of armor that it's basically is meant to fix the Russian, not the Russian, but the enemy Russian enemy troops around the positions and give the intel for the main force to attack. And then basically once they acquire where this weak point is, then at that weak point inside the front line, they will then send in their whole armada. And their logic for advancing, for example, on the front lines, imagine you have a front line, you have left wing, you have right wing of your advance, and you have the center. Imagine your center, left wing, and right wing start advancing, and you have some reserves. And in those reserves, for example, you see that your left wing is actually not doing so hot, but your right wing is actually pushing the enemy. So where would you send reserves in this situation? Would you help the wing that is failing and the enemy is pushing on that side? Or would you send the support to the wing that is advancing and having some kind of success? Well, Russian motto is very simple. If there is any slight of success, then push everything that you have in there, and the left wing, just let them have it. And then from the parts that are doing okay, take some part of that and put it more into the success part. So basically, it's essentially like a wedge, imagine. So it's like as soon as they find the weak point, they're just going to hammer with everything that they have to get this weak point in the enemy line to break. That is how the Soviets essentially are planning to use. But I deviated. Why are Western style tanks so important? Well, the first thing is because they're using different ammo. We know that Ukraine is struggling with ammunition. We know that Ukraine has been struggling with getting enough Soviet type ammunition because it didn't produce their own. So having tanks now that are using ammunition that is wildly available in pretty much every European country is really good news. Second, the best capabilities that the tanks are providing is that if the crews are trained well enough, they are very well integrated in a 21st century data-based warfare. So they're able to acquire information from all the different sources. And this is very important because we see just how prevalent, for example, the drone use is on the Ukrainian battlefields. And these tanks are able to be used as this mobile hubs of essentially information capture and then delegation. This will help. Imagine this kind of tank that's being supported by some of the Russian tanks, the Soviet style tanks. Then this tank can easily be in charge of it, and then we have like dedicated firepower. But again, like I'm not the best battlefield tactician. I'm just explaining that the Western style tanks are a lot more durable, and also the policy. The Western style tanks were built to be essentially these machines of destruction. Whereas, as I just explained before in quite a lengthy explanation, the Soviet style tanks were built to be very nice, but the idea was to overwhelm your enemy. They actually have like a whole calculations on like everything, like how much like a specific type of tank is valued in its numbers. And then you can like, okay, we have this scientific formula, how many tanks we should have, depending on what the enemy have. So we can calculate this whole formula to know how many tanks do we need to send a specific way. It's actually quite fascinating. This was something that I never knew about, but now I do. And the last part is that these tanks are having a better inside system ecosystem. So it's air conditioning, it's just the inside comfort of the tank for drivers. And the best part is also the optics. While maybe the optics for the Russians, some of the Russian tanks and more modern ones can be compared, like T90Ms and so on. But Russia is not using a lot of these tanks. There is actually many tanks that are a lot older, like T72s. So these kind of tanks, they can really do night raids. Like they have the spotting capabilities to essentially detect enemies like over a distance of 5 kilometers if the site allows it over the night, and distinguish it and then fire, especially something like Challenger, because it has like a barrel that allows it to fire quite far away. or they can just be as a spotter and then just send this information to the command or whatnot and then demand artillery strike. So they bring a lot to the table. But obviously, the most important for all of the tanks is the idea that now we are opening the floodgates for the tanks to be used in Ukraine. We are overcoming our insecurities around Putin. And I'm going to say it as it is. This is a conspiracy theory that I'm hearing, that actually some of the American, there was some kind of secret negotiations with Putin before Ramstein meeting that were trying to find out if there is any kind of possibility or to negotiate with Putin. And essentially what was proposed to Putin was that, hey, maybe if you agree to, withdraw your troops from the Ukrainian territory and then leave Crimea, we can help persuade Ukraine to save you the face, to give you an off-ramp and so on. And instead, Putin essentially spewed in those proposal phases and said, I just want to keep whatever I'm controlling right now. This is what Ukraine needs to agree. Again, this is like a complete conspiracy theory. I have no idea how they're coming up with this, but like some of the somewhat notable Russian journalists have been reporting this. Believe it or not, I leave it up to you with that. So all in all, the tank deliveries to Ukraine have started. We see that this is going to be the start. If the tank deliveries are going to take 3 to 4 months, then we should expect that Ukraine, if it's going to start any kind of major offensive, it's also going to be in about 3 to 4 months. So the next months, Russia will have more of an advantage if Ukraine is going to wait to make its move. So that's going to be 3 hard months, gotta say. Most probably we're going to see land being taken and so on. So I said it last time, I'm going to say it again. But I'm going to be here for you, and I'm going to be explaining to you everything that is to explain about Ukraine. Oh, and one last thing. So some time ago, I actually did integration with a channel sponsor at the time. It was Atlas VPN. It was my first ever channel sponsor, and I was so happy. I was actually ecstatic because Atlas VPN is useful. I mean, it's a VPN service. But I am such a shitty salesman that literally... So they're like, reach out to me, hey Georgie, okay, so we've tried campaign like with you with like your link, whatnot. We got like one person that came to us. I was like, oh no. I was so ashamed about just how bad of a salesman I am in trying to promote anything. So I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm sorry for that. So probably I'm not going to get any sponsorships anytime soon because of that. But I really want to thank Atlas VPN. At that moment, reach out. I'm struggling a little bit with the YouTube advertisement monetization. So Atlas VPN has been really, really helpful back then, and I'm really thankful for them. And I'm thankful to you guys that you continue watching this channel. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you guys next time.